Can see you.
Okay, great. So let's get started. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being with us today. My name is Sarah Isa. I'm the partnership consultant here at the UN Resident Coordinator's Office. I'm delighted to welcome you all today to today's webinar, Partnership for Goals. We're holding this webinar today to highlight some of the exciting partnerships currently in the works for advancing the SDGs in Saudi Arabia, explore the opportunities for synergies and collaboration between UN, business, and government representatives. We're also joined by some wonderful panelists from the government, from the Ministry of Economy and Planning, United Nations Resident Coordinator's Office, and from UN Global Compact, who will be joining us later in this webinar. So thank you all for joining. Before we get started, I wanted to quickly take you through the agenda and logistics of the webinar. So just a second. Okay. So we'll start with a panel discussion moderated by Mr. Mohammed Ail, Senior Sustainability Analyst at SABIC, to get a better understanding about where we stand with regards to the 2030 vision and how the private sector can collaborate with UN agencies and government representatives. Then we will turn it to you. Hopefully you will have some questions to our panelists. We welcome you all to send those questions in advance of the discussion. In terms of logistics, all webinar participants will be muted. However, please use the chat or raise hand functionality to ask questions or make comment. We will have some time for questions at the end of the panel discussion. So let's get started. Mr. Mohammed Ail is a Senior Sustainability Analyst in SABIC Corporate Sustainability Department. His key role is to work with business units to deliver the goals of the SABIC sustainability portfolio and execution of the corporate 2025 strategy. He also provides regional support to businesses on SABIC sustainability strategy roadmap and now became more involved in broad sustainability and climate change initiative. Furthermore, he is a Saudi delegate in the climate change negotiations, as well as involved in some of the G20 energy and climate activities under the Ministry of Energy during KSA G20 presidency. So I now invite Mr. Mohammed Ail to moderate this exciting panel.
Thank you very much, Sarah, and for this kind and nice introductions. I appreciate it. First of all, I hope that everybody is safe wherever you are and due to the current circumstances. And many thanks to the UN Residence Coordinator Office and the UN Global Compact for jointly organizing this webinars. As we know, at the heart of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, there is always an emphasis that there is nobody left behind. So this webinars comes at a critical time. And today we have many great three speakers that we're going to discuss some exciting partnerships and collaborations that currently working in the advancing of the SDGs here in Saudi Arabia. As Sarah has mentioned, if you have, we're going to open the dialogue at the end for some Q&A from the participants. So please, as we pose the questions to our speakers, feel free to write your questions in the chat, and Sarah will take those at the end as time permits. And for the speakers, for each questions, we'll kindly ask you that you have 7 minutes maximum, just to allow more at the end of the webinar for more dialogues. So we're going to start with Her Excellency Natalie Foster. Natalie is a residence coordinator in Saudi Arabia. She is responsible for overseeing and facilitating the work of all UN agencies across the country. She previously, before she joins this role, she was working at the OCHA in various capacities, including the head office in Lebanon, senior humanitarian affairs officers for the Middle East, and OCHA head office in Turkey. Prior to joining that, Ms. Foster, she had worked in about 8 years in private sectors, advising international companies on various roles and issues related to specifically to the Gulf and Middle East. And in parallel, she was also volunteering as the president for the Women's Foundations for the Mediterranean, which is a French NGO, non-government organizations. Without further ado, we're just going to come to the questions. Our first questions is basically posed to Ms. Natalie. So having having worked in the private sector's industry and being the UN residence coordinator at the moment, how do you see the UN and businesses supporting each other to advance the 2030 agenda? Natalie, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mohamed. I would like to say salam alaikum to all of you. Good afternoon. I am very honored to take the floor in this webinar and to welcome my colleagues and the participants today. So yes, I have been working for a few years in the private sector, and I think it's very important in my role of resident coordinator to be able to understand at least a bit more than others what is the modus operandi of the private sectors, what are the objectives, and what is it that they can take from the UN and give to the UN and help us to realize together the SDGs. So as you know, we have entered 2020 and almost finished the year, and the clock is ticking louder than ever before when it comes to the Sustainable Development Goals. We know that progress has been made since the goals were launched in 2015, but we are not advancing at the scale or at the pace that is required. In recognition to this, the United Nations has called for 2020 to usher in a decade of action to deliver the goals by 2030, so in 10 years' time. And the UN Secretary General, Mr. Antonio Guterres, has now outlined what he sees as being his priorities for the make or break decade that lies ahead of us. And of course, the private sectors has a critical role to play in determining whether or not the SDGs are realized over the course of the next decade. And similarly needs to take stock of its efforts and identify its own priority SDGs engagement areas, the areas where it is best equipped to drive real action and impact. Although the end goals of the United Nations and business are quite distinct, there are many critical common objectives, such as building markets, combating corruption, safeguarding the environment, increasing food security, and ensuring social inclusion. There are a variety of approaches taken to support the private sector, including capacity building programs, community-based initiatives, time-bound projects, individual company commitment, and multi-stakeholder collective initiatives. In Saudi Arabia, we are building a platform for businesses through the Global Compact to come together and identify common challenges and shared goals alongside relevant UN, civil society, academia, and government partners with a view toward amplifying outcomes and results to inspire and activate other companies to follow leading examples. So again, I believe that the private sector is a key component of realizing the SDGs, and I am very glad that in Saudi Arabia, we are now leading towards having a local network of the Global Compact in the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, Natalie. This was indeed, you're absolutely right. I think the private sector is going to be an important part to move the needles on this. And now jumping to the next, our great panelist, Mr. Majid Al-Asfour. Mr. Majid is the General Manager of the Strategy Alignment and the Assistant of Deputyship for the Sustainable Development Affairs in the Ministry of Economic and Planning. Mr. Majid is an expert in sustainability and the strategic transformations. He joined the ministry in 2019 and worked in multiple projects, that's including the national policies, the National Transformation Program 2.0, NTP, as well as some of the economic reports and the sustainable developments. He is also very busy with, mashallah, many members and committees. He's a member of the Arab Committee that followed up in the implementation of the SDGs in the Arab regions, as well as a member of the Sustainable Development Programs under the Secretary General of the Cooperation Council for the Arab States. And he is a member of the Executive Committee for the United Nations Economic and Social Commissions for Western Asia. Mr. Majid, glad to have you here. I think the next question is posed to you. How do you see, or where do we stand in terms of achieving the 2030 agenda and the SDGs specifically here in Saudi Arabia. Mr. Majid.
Thank you, Mohammed, for the comprehensive introduction, and thank you, everybody. It's just such a pleasure to be here with you today as part of this interesting discussion. Allow me to answer your question in two folds. Of course, as you realize, and all of you realize here, that achieving SDGs requires a certain level of transformation. You know, we need to implement, and at the same time, we need to perfect that ecosystem that accommodates this implementation to ensure that we have sustainable results. So when it comes to the progress and achievement in the kingdom, we have two things to look at. Number one, where do we stand from achieving these goals? And number two, where do we stand from building that enabling environment to make sure that those who are achieving these results, you know, are working collaboratively, are coherent in their approach, and they take into consideration that integrated level of SDGs. Of course, we are part of this world, and we are facing many difficulties when it comes to implementation of these goals. We have been progressing well in the last 4 years. However, we still face challenges or critical challenges in specific goals. For example, goal number 2, ending hunger and food security, we have some critical challenges when it comes to food waste and obesity. And these things require a heavy involvement of government sector, private sector, and NGOs. So, and maybe in the last 3 years, we have been working collaboratively with stakeholders directly to tackle these challenges, and we have been progressing a little bit well, but a little bit slow as well. So this is why we're shifting this approach now to accommodate the ecosystem and enabling environment. When it comes to progress, we are facing some difficulties in goal number 2, which is ending hunger, and goal number 5, which is gender equality, and in the environmental dimension. Those things are actually one of the critical elements that we are facing. Challenges are in Saudi Arabia in comparison to other countries, of course. But when we look at the national context, we have been embarking a great journey in the last 4 years since the launch of Vision 2030. And if you all have seen the statements made by Prince Mohammed bin Salman in the last few days, you can see the level of progress that we had across the kingdom the last 4 years. As I said, we still face some critical challenges in those areas and the other areas. This is when it comes to implementation. We have a long way to go. We are behind in some of the areas when it comes to implementing the goals, and maybe we are advancing here and there in comparison to the other countries in the region. However, to put it in specific, we still have some of the gaps within the ecosystem that does not allow us to have the full picture for each goal. And this is where the ecosystem or the enabling environment comes into place, right? So when I look at this goal number 2, back to my example that we're facing challenges when it comes to obesity, for example. We're one of the highest rates in the world when it comes to obesity, around 35 to 39%. This is the top of the world, sitting in the top 3 ranks. Now, what are we doing to this? You know, this is the effort that we need to put together those multi-stakeholder engagement to tackle these kind of issues. You know, government sector, public sector, private sector, NGOs, and the citizens, academia, all of them have to work collaboratively to tackle such an issue and scale this up across all the goals. This is where you have a really complex agenda to work with when it comes to enabling environment. So the next journey we're embarking is to make sure that we have that policy coherence, to make sure that we have the enabling environment for all the stakeholders to do their role, and to make sure that we have the partnership required to achieve such a challenge. This is in brief where we stand. We are hoping that the next 1.5 years, you know, to finalize those enabling environments for the private sector to function, which is maybe the in-depth discussion we're going to have maybe later today, and this, and also the NGOs and also the public sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Majid. And I think the progress is definitely there, and I'm sure the Ministry of Economic and Planning are putting a lot of efforts there. But they're also, as you mentioned, I think the enabling environment and the policy that will play a major role. So thank you very much, Mr. Majid. And right now we want to turn out to our third great speakers. But before I do so, I have seen many people joined. So just a quick recap, we have great 3 speakers. We're going to have an open dialogue at the end. So please keep your questions coming in the chat, and Sarah will take this at the end. So our third speaker is Alexandra Tarazi. Ms. Alexandra is a senior manager in the global operations under the United Nations Global Compact. She works at the UN Global Compact on this. I don't know how many, but maybe she can tell us. But she manages in the development of the growth of the impact-oriented of the global compact local networks across the Middle East and Eastern Europe. And as Natalie has mentioned, this is something new in the Saudi. Ms. Alexandra, main responsibilities include the supporting of these local networks programs and providing the expertise and input for these local networks, strategic and operational planning, based, of course, on the research and analysis of the corporate sustainability trends in our region, in the Middle East. So our first questions goes to Ms. Alexandra. Why exactly the UN Global Compact and its 10 principles, and maybe you can touch a bit on this, is relevant to the businesses looking to align their strategic and operations with the SDGs? Alexandra?
Yes, thank you very much. I hope you can all hear me well. Thank you so much for the introduction, and I'm very pleased to be here among all of you and happy to also address this important question. So in order to address this question, I do think it's important to provide a quick, brief background on the Global Compact Initiative and how it came about, and also why it came about in the first place, and why now, 20 years down the line since we've been in existence back in the year 2000, why are we still relevant? So as many of you may know or may not know, the Global Compact was launched 20 years ago by the former Secretary General Kofi Annan, who reached out to a group of CEOs, a small number at the time, at the World Economic Forum, and really called on them to come together to initiate a global compact of shared values and principles to give a human face to the global market. And it's important to also emphasize the year. So that was the year 2000, really at the heights of globalization, when we were feeling the effects of globalization and the strain on the environment as well as on the society. And Kofi Annan indeed did caution that if we fail to make globalization work for all, it would work for none. And so really the idea was to bring together the universality of the United Nations, the innovative capacities of the private sector, and really come together to tackle these difficult challenges that we have together. So, it was very interesting to hear previously Majid as well as Nathalie really emphasize the need to bring various stakeholders together in a platform to push the envelope and to achieve the SDGs together. So that's what the Global Compact's all about. The idea is to devise, or the Global Compact has indeed devised, a set of principles or values which would form the basis upon which responsible business would operate. And so the Global Compact did launch a set of 10 principles on human rights, labor, environment, and anti-corruption. And these 10 principles don't come from thin air, but they're essentially rooted on universally accepted UN conventions. And the idea is for companies to take these 10 principles and to integrate them into their operations. And the way that we position the 10 principles is indeed the entry point for the SDGs. They ensure that companies have their house in order. And so again, that very much, I think, addresses that question. And going back to some of the progress to date. So, indeed there has been progress, but there's still a very long way to go in order to reach the 2030 agenda. And we are unfortunately not on track to do so. So there are, some clear KPIs that we can take a look at. We know that we're over 250 years away to close the economic gender gap. There are 8 million tons of plastic that are entering the ocean. The latest global estimates indicate that over 150 million children are engaged in child labor. And on climate change, in the absence of policies and business action, global warming is expected to reach over 3 degrees Celsius. And what that then requires is for companies, and again, this was noted by our previous speakers, we need transformational change to get us on track to create the world we want. And the UN Global Compact is now the world's largest corporate sustainability initiative with over 11,000 companies that are taking a principled approach and setting ambitious goals to hopefully in the next decade reach these SDGs. So I hope that's sort of the long-winded response to that question on why indeed the Global Compact and the 10 principles are relevant.
Indeed, very well. And as you mentioned, I think the principles approach is universals to most of the nations, but I think that's at the heart of them, at the beginning is the SDGs, where everything spread to help and compact global challenges. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Back to you, Nathalie, to another questions, and I think you have touched this at the beginning of your or the first questions. But as we enter the decade of actions, and that's to deliver on the goals of the goal of the SDGs by 2030, and knowing that the SDG 17 specifically is talking about the partnerships. Can you kind of let us know how you are collaborating with stakeholders, specifically here in Saudi Arabia, given your role in overcoming the obstacles and creating more synergies between these businesses and private sectors?
Thank you, Mohammed. So first of all, I am a strong believer in partnership and the collaborative approach. So it's something that I have been trying to put into action in all my capacities during my professional life. And I am really glad to see that it's at the core of the UN business to talk about partnership. So as I see it, SDG 17 is the mother of all goals. And without significant progress on SDG 17, it will be very difficult to achieve the rest of the 16 goals and almost even impossible to do so. So that is why in the UN in KSA, we have been keen to expand the focus of our work and to reach out to a number of partnerships in areas that were seen here as a kind of untapped potential. So we have been keen to engage with the civil society, building on existing partnership with some foundations or charities, but expanding it also by assisting several G20 engagement groups, by acting as strategic advisors, and also reaching out to some NPOs, including the Saudi Food Bank, FACIL, Talga, and others. And we are expanding, and not only in Riyadh, where we are willing to expand our reach in the 13 governorates of KSA. It's a difficult task for us because it's a stretch, and also the culture of localizing the SDGs, or localizing the UN action is a bit new, but it's something that is very dear to us. So we also work closely with universities on advancing the SDGs and the 2030 agenda. One, I think, great example is our cooperation with Princess Noura University, where we started to train 1,700 women in leadership positions, both in private and public sectors, on SDGs. So it's a module of half a day, and more importantly, I guess, not only we have started to train those women, but we have trained trainers in Princess Noura University, trainers that are now able and eager to do more and to help the private sectors and other entities to be trained on SDGs if need be. We also produced a diagnostic paper with Prince Sultan University on the socio-economic impact of COVID-19 on the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in order to assess the socio-economic impact of COVID-19, but also to identify what are the gaps in order for the UN to be able, in consultation with the government, to see where we can do better and where we can try to bridge these gaps. Also, one of the great opportunity that is now coming is we are entering a phase where we will define our new cooperation framework with the government. And within the work that we need to do to ensure that this cooperation framework is thoroughly sought, we need to engage with various stakeholders. The government, of course, but also the private sector, the civil society, and the academia, university, and think tank. So this will be a great opportunity, and we will see with our colleagues and friends, Majid, how we can do it rightly. So the RC Office and the Islamic Cooperation for the Development of the Private Sector have also identified AUCAF as an important source of sustainable financing for KSA's Vision 2030, National Transformation Plan, the UN Agenda 2030, and the Sustainable Development Goals. Through this partnership, we have undertook a strategic studies on the potential of AUCAF in KSA for the realization of SDGs and Vision 2030, and at the same time for contributing to the achievement of common goals in the NTP and the KSA Vision 2030. This is an important piece because we are reaching out to people that normally never heard about the UN, don't know that the UN is keen on also partnering with them and bringing in their knowledge to do better for the society and for the global good as well. So I am very proud of this initiative, and I hope it will be another opportunity to collaborate with the private sector on this. We have also strengthened collaboration with the private sector. I told you, NGOs, NPOs, university, governments to facilitate public-private dialogues around the SDGs and support the development and implementation of effective national plans and policies. So we are in conversation with the Ministry of Economy and Planning, with the Ministry of Commerce, with the Council of Saudi Chambers, and also, as you know, with this private sector by the through the interim working group, and soon I hope through the local network. So this is a powerful force, but again, we have to work hand by hand and to work together in order to achieve these goals. The initiative with the private sector is mostly around the Global Compact for now. We want to be able to help companies to align their strategies and operation with the 10 UN principles, as Alexandra mentioned, and the 17 SDGs. So I guess that Alexandra will discuss this initiative with further details along this webinar. But again, the potential power of partnership is enormous. When it's done right, it's unlock huge opportunities, and we can see the significant value of all those cooperation. So it's up to us to make sure that this will happen. And again, I am a strong believer in it. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Always inspiring with your remarks. I cannot top that off. I think collaboration, and we cannot do it alone. I think there's always a collective actions together, and all of the SDGs sometimes it differs how a person can make the impact from each one. So the priorities can shift, but collectively we can achieve the common grounds and to be equipped and make the impact. Mr. Majid, I think we're going to put you on the spot here, but I think in the 2030 agenda for the sustainable developments, businesses are playing an integral role in achieving the sustainable developments on the ground. And there are some questions. How can the private sectors or the public-private sectors can better contribute to the development of these processes? Mr. Majid?
Thank you, Mohammed. Well, to answer this question, we have to take a look at both the role of the public sector into activating the private sector role, and the role of the private sector to contribute more to the sustainability of our projects or our progress. Now, if we look at some of the efforts that have been set in place in the kingdom through Vision 2030, we have many VRPs that have direct let's say, direct impact onto and activating the role of the private sector. Now we have set as Vision 2030 a percentage of the private sector contribution to GDP to 60% by 2030. Now we are sitting at 40% contribution from this private sector into the GDP of our country. Now there has been a lot of progress in this regard, and to moving excuse me, or shifting this contribution even more. But this requires heavy involvement from both the public sector and the private sector. Nobody denies that the private sector is a partner in development in many areas, you know, in infrastructure, in capacity development, in development areas. But again, there are some areas and we have to take into consideration when it comes to this on both national, regional, and local level, just like Natalie said. I think the local level is something that we need to pay more attention to. Now, when we look at the contribution of the private sector to sustainability, for now, maybe this has two dimensions, right? So the contribution of the private sector at large to the to achieving the sustainability, and the private sector itself adopting sustainable practices. Those things are a little bit different. One part is something that we, the government, has to take care of, you know, to provide that ecosystem for the private sector to engage with us and be partner through public and private partnership, you know, and unlocking these potential areas. And the other dimension is helping the private sector adopt sustainable practices. So we are taking into consideration both of these dimensions. If we look at the side of the government sector now, enabling the private sector, this is what challenges we are facing as the government sector. Now, when we look at the private sector and when we want to push their adaptation to sustainability, we see that now the thinking around sustainability is as minimum as it gets in Saudi Arabia. Now, maybe through the last 3 years, there has been some push and progress through that. But when it comes, for example, to assessment of these private sector adopting sustainability, the numbers are low. Out of the 200 plus listed companies in our stock exchange, only 9 are disclosing their information when it comes to sustainability. This is less than 5%. This is a challenge. Despite the effort, despite the awareness, despite the national push that we are having, despite the international trend that we see in adopting sustainability, yet the numbers are slow, right? So there is a huge attention that we need to take care of as a government to push the private sector to adopt. And when we sat with them and surveyed some of them, let's say 50% or a little bit more are aware of the importance of sustainability, you know? But how do they start? What do they do as a step one to adopt sustainability? Here comes the challenge. Here comes where we need to collaborate with the private sector to help them raise their awareness, build their capacity, make sure that their operation and strategic objectives are aligned with whatever we want as a country. So this is where we shift the focus on the challenges that the private sector is facing. You know, the ecosystem itself, the enabling environment that they have, the let's say the strategic direction, the priority areas that we need to focus on as a country, the capacity building dimension, the lack of incentive for them to actually adopt such sustainable practices. So we are trying to tackle both things. For us, the government, to push the private sector, we need to adopt sustainability as well as a country. And we have been progressing well, but we have yet to put certain set of criteria that the public sector is moving toward, or the public sector is adopting to show that we are adopting sustainability. This is one dimension that we are working on through a set of strategic initiatives rolling out for the next year and a half. Now, when it comes to National Transformation Program, we have set several initiatives to actually help the private sector adopt sustainability. One has been launched already, led by the Ministry of Commerce this year, which is the National Sustainability Criteria for the private sector. Now, the next phase is actually to roll out these national sustainability criteria phased out to make sure that at least minimum criteria is being met throughout the private sector, maybe in the next 1.5 years will be voluntary, but the approach is to make them mandatory through time. You know, maybe we start with the listed companies at first, given that they are mature enough, they have the financial backbone to do that. Then we can go on a different phase, tackling the different sectors and the small and medium enterprises. Of course, based on the sectors, we have to be a little bit flexible. We have some pilot studies in the kingdom regarding some sustainability criteria. We see them relevant more in the mega projects, Red Sea, the Amala, Neom, Al-Ula, etc. All of these mega projects have already embarked the journey of adopting certain sustainable criteria, whether for the public or the private. But we are working from a bigger umbrella, tackling the overall objective. So pushing that requires also effort and different level of partnerships, right? Whether with the UN, with the UN Global Compact, and different private sector entities who are a role model in this, or even NGOs who have been supporting those kind of initiatives. So we cannot do this only from the public sector point of view, right? We have also to activate the other stakeholders. Even universities help in that, just like Natalie said. There has been a lot of effort, let's say here and there, you know, but we need to focus that effort, inshallah, in the next 1.5 years to make sure that we are activating the private sector in the right way and incentivize them with what they need. Of course, they are facing a lot of challenges, you know, just like I mentioned before, but the majority of the challenges lie within the incentives, the capacity development, and the regulatory approach for disclosing those kind of information. And this is what we are focused on in the next phase. The making sure that we have the regulation, you know, to disclose those information, making sure that we have a platform that they are engaged in and they can submit their reports, making sure we can incentivize them and build their capacity to make sure they can adopt these kind of criteria. This is in general what we are doing for the next phase.
Amazing. You take us, mashallah, Mr. Majid, through what you have done and the next. And I agree with you. It's a challenge, I think, moving to 60% specifically for the companies, and the contribution to SDGs is not easy. And as you rightfully mentioned, you have seen it on the ground. People are different. Maybe they know this is something they have to do, but they don't know where to start. And I think that's where the collaboration comes in. And it's a journey. And right now, I think sustainability is not a nice to have anymore, but rather it's a requirement, and it's affecting right now the bottom line of some companies in the future, in the long term. Thank you very much, Mr. Majid. And right now, Ms. Alexandra, I'm going to turn to you to a final questions before we turn to the dialogue and take the participants' questions. You have talked about the UN Global Compact and the 10 principles, and I think the questions are let's piggyback on what Mr. Majid has mentioned. Some people do not know where to go. So if you could just shed light on what are the current tools and resources that the UN Global Compact could provide to all, as well as to their participants. Alexandra, the floor is yours.
Yes, great. Absolutely. So I also just want to add to the point that Majid made. Indeed, we definitely see an increased number of companies that are aware of the SDGs, that do, of course, understand the value of integrating it into their operations. But the bigger question is they're not necessarily knowing where to start or what they need to do. And just before I present a few tools that the Global Compact makes available to its companies around the world in 160 countries, I did want to note that on an annual basis, the UN Global Compact issues a survey whereby we assess how our companies are faring in terms of the progress on the SDGs, and also the progress in the policies that they've put in place. And the good news is that, again, there is a lot of awareness. There is a lot of understanding of the value. We see that 84% of companies are taking some form of action, and that across the 10 principles, 90% of businesses over the past 5 years have indicated that they've incorporated policies. However, what we're not seeing is ambition and scale. For example, we see that many companies are failing to actually assess and understand the adverse effect that they are having on society and on the environment. And so they're not necessarily running these impact assessments. Only 18% of the companies that we have surveyed are formalizing impact assessments on human rights. Only 29% have impact assessments on labor rights. And so we can see that there's definitely a disconnect. And in addition to that, many of the goals that they're setting are not fully aligned with societal needs and with the SDGs. So that begs the question again, what does the UN Global Compact do to support those companies? The way that we position our offerings is within three umbrella or three categories. So first and foremost, we provide an open and transparent platform for companies to set goals and commitments and report on them. Again, as Majid noted, it is incredibly important for companies to report transparently on where they are with the SDGs. And the UN Global Compact is also in the process of revamping its reporting framework. And so next year, we should have a new reporting framework that's even more aligned with the SDGs, and that also provides a database of data that can tell us and other stakeholders where are companies faring. So that's the first thing, is that the Global Compact provides this public platform whereby 11,000 companies now are reporting on their progress. Secondly, we are supporting in capacity building, and we understand that companies are at various levels of in their journey, some more developed than others. And so we do have a number of resources available, whether it's the Academy, which is a learning platform, or something that we call global impact initiatives, which are accelerator programs that really handhold companies in setting goals and working together. Most importantly, we know that companies really learn from peer learning opportunities to advance in their journey. And so the Global Compact, through its local networks, and again, as Nathalie noted, we do hope to have a local network here in Saudi in the next months, where we would work really together with all of our companies to set those goals and make progress on an annual basis. And the third opportunity that we provide our companies is a seat at the table. Again, Majid, you noted the enabling environment, and the UN Global Compact has over 11,000 companies that have joined it. Indeed, our mandate is corporate sustainability, but we know that we cannot do this with companies only. We need the enabling environment. We need the regulatory landscape. We need the investors, the stock exchanges, the consumers, all to come behind us. And so we do have a set of action platforms whereby with these multi-stakeholders and our companies, we produce thought leadership to really push the agenda. In addition to the fact that we also organize a number of policy dialogues with government and businesses and civil society all coming together. So I hope that addresses the question, and happy to also take questions as they come.
Thank you very much, Alexandra. I'm sure there are going to be a lot of people who have some questions, but I think, as you mentioned, the three big umbrellas and the benefits and the resources is to sometimes setting goals is not enough. Sometimes reporting them is what's going to help you to make sure you are progressing and you're holding yourself accountable. Academy and peer learning, and as a SABIC, we've been a signatory for the United Nations Global Compact since 2012. You need to compare yourselves to others to kind of see what they're learning, how we can improve each other, and that will set the improvements and where you're going through learning from others. And of course, the third one is seats at the tables to kind of be part of this as it's an ever-changing. Thank you very much, Alexandra, Mr. Majid, and Your Excellency, Nathalie. Very great discussions. We have a few minutes for the dialogue. So right now I'll turn the mic to Sarah to take us if there's any question from the table. Sarah?
Yes, thank you, everyone. I just wanted to add to Alex's point
So currently there's a partnership has been established with the Global Compact to promote this local network in Saudi Arabia and possibly explore the opportunity to launch this network by early next year. So we are really thankful for the interim working group who is currently being chaired by the UN Resin Coordinator. They are helping us with promoting the UN Global Compact, the 10 principles in Saudi Arabia. They're working in collaboration with UN agencies to encourage private sector contributions, whether it was to national development action plans, to EBNRs. They're also helping us, they're providing us with updates on corporate sustainability trends and who are the key actors in Saudi Arabia. And finally, they're proposing what would be the activity plan, what are the company's interests and among other prerequisites to help us with establish this local network in Saudi Arabia. So I think we'll turn it now to the questions. Let's see. So we had a very nice conversation between participants. Maybe we'll start with Mr. Fawaz Al-Shamiri. They recently joined the UN Global Compact, and I guess Alexandra can help with this question. So he comes from a startup background, and he wants to know how he can collaborate, or how he can have like this interest in sustainability and the SDGs, and how we can help them on this journey. So I think Alex can help with that.
Yeah, happy to address that. So the UN Global Compact, as I noted, does provide a number of resources to help its companies from the very start of its journey as it progresses. And so if you've just joined the UN Global Compact and you would like to know, you first and foremost, you would want an assessment on where you stand on sustainability. We have a fantastic tool that we've developed in line with B-Lab. It's called the SDG Action Manager. And the SDG Action Manager is a very robust self-assessment tool that will help you first and foremost your strengths, and then also where are some of the challenges that you may be facing, and will actually produce. And so that's the first thing. Second of all, clearly we do notice that there are networks across the countries where we operate in. That's where a company finds the most value. So as I know, Impact has presence in 160 countries, but we only have 69 local networks. Local networks are entities in their own right, and of course, they do require a lot of resources to get up and running and to also sustain themselves. And once we do have a full functioning local network, there will be a lot of opportunities to be had on the ground alongside your peers to really help you move along in your journey. But I hope that does address the question. And I also want to add, do send me an email, and I'm happy to put you in touch with our HQ that can also direct you to more resources that could be available to you.
Thank you, Alexandra. Fawaz here. I will do that for sure.
Great, Fawaz.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Fawaz, for your question. The next question, I guess it would be to Mr. Majid Al-Asfour. Mr. Ronaldo is asking, where can I find an official document or reports that link Saudi Vision 2030 with the UN SDGs and the G20 goals and objectives?
Well, the first part, linking SDGs with Vision 2030, you can find it in our voluntary national review, where you can access it actually on the UN Sustainable Development website. But linking it to G20 priorities have stemmed from this year's presidency. And I guess soon enough you will see the declaration on the G20 website, in which you can see the work of the development working group regarding the action items aligned with the SDGs right after the presidency or the summit ends, inshallah. But by the way, for the voluntary review, that was from the year 2018. Inshallah, the next version we are working on submitting them hopefully next year as well.
Thank you, Mr. Majid. So we just have a comment from Ms. Garcia. She's saying that sometimes organizations are doing a lot in terms of sustainability without even realizing. This is why the first step, which she believes, is to evaluate where they stand in terms of sustainability, what should be the metrics to evaluate and quantify the real impact. Then there are various steps which she believes are important to building the infrastructure within the private sector companies to really embed sustainability as a key business priority. So thank you, Garcia, for your comment. And I guess thank you everyone for joining this session today. So just as a final remark, I would just wanted to say for like a final call to action, we encourage all participants to play an active role for the 2030 vision by collaborating with UN agencies and government representatives, and of course being members of the UN Global Compact. Feel free to reach out to me or to my colleague Ibrahim if you have any questions. We'll be sharing this recording of the webinar with you shortly. We'd like to extend a big thank you to our wonderful speakers who took the time to join us today. And of course, a big thank you to Mr. Mohammed Aeel. We highly appreciate it and we hope to continue this conversation in the near future. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Stay safe.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.